Now that our child is born, let's have a baby shower since it's your first grandchild. Please be generous with the gift money. Gloating, I handed over an envelope with some money inside, only to receive a shrill response. Just $300. Don't insult me. That won't even cover diapers. Shocked, she turned pale and started to tremble. My name is Olivia, a 57-year-old office worker. My husband, John, runs an auto repair shop with our son-in-law, Mason, who married our oldest daughter, Ava. They specialize in luxury cars, which seems to be working out since the business is thriving. With a lot of demand from luxury car dealerships and high repair and inspection fees, Mason often cheerfully remarks, "You're really good at business. I need to learn from you and work hard too." Mason and Ava got married 5 years ago. He was originally an average office worker, but had a fondness for cars. He got his mechanic certification and started working under John. We don't live together with our daughter and son-in-law, but since Ava recently started working at her husband's garage as a secretary, we see them almost daily. Though our house and the shop are separate, they're nearby, so I drop by sometimes, and the four of us often hang out together. Mason is an outgoing person and easy to talk to. Anyone would think he's our real son. We do have a biological son, but ever since he left home for his job, we rarely see him. William is 2 years younger than Ava and never took an interest in his father's job. After graduating from college, he joined a regular company. When he was in elementary school, he used to say, "When I grow up, I'll take over Dad's shop." But as he got older, his mindset changed. There's no way you can make a living working at a repair shop these days. I don't want to be covered in grease either. John never intended to have William succeed him in the first place. Still, when William declared that he had no intention of taking over the business, he looked sad. John had hired several employees and was contemplating the future. When Mason joined the business, it seemed like he started to think about what lay ahead. If there were no successors, he planned to give the employees a heads up so they could find work elsewhere. But with Mason in the picture, he intended to leave the business in capable hands. Ava never imagined that Mason would succeed her father, but she asked, taken aback yet relieved, "I knew Mason loved cars, but I never thought he'd become my dad's apprentice and take over. But since William never planned to take over, it's no problem, right? My husband's business is doing well, which is probably why Ava is always asking me if William's going to ask for the shop later." Ava has a good reason to worry. William's wife, Emma, has a somewhat uncouth side. William and Emma got married 2 years ago, and even from the first time they came to our house to introduce Emma, she made quite an impression. The first thing Emma said when she arrived with William was, "This is a very blue-collar home, isn't it? Is this what self-employed people's homes are like?" My husband and I were so taken aback that we couldn't say anything in response. Ava, who was also present, seemed to be infuriated and immediately retorted, "Who do you think you are? What are you saying to your fiance's parents?" However, Emma stood her ground, saying, "I'm just expressing my true feelings. Please stop picking on me before we're even married." I tried to calm down the two women who were about to get into a fight and attempted to proceed with the marriage introduction. But William said, "Just because we're getting married doesn't mean we'll live here or rely on you." It seemed like William was not pleased with Mason helping out with his father's job and getting along well with us. Since Ava and Mason got married, William seemed to want to distance himself from us even more. Mason also didn't join us that day out of consideration, but William made a sarcastic remark, saying, "Ava's husband isn't here today, huh?" I thought it would be embarrassing if he showed up all greasy and dirty like he usually is. I'm relieved he's not here. Although he said he wouldn't take over my husband's shop, he might not be happy that Mason, who isn't related by blood, would be the successor. Upon hearing William's words, I felt angry and retorted, "Are you jealous of Mason? You were the one who said you wouldn't take over your father's shop." As I raised my voice, my mild-mannered husband calmed me down, saying, "Don't get so angry, everyone. Since William's fiancée came to introduce herself, let's try to get along." As this was supposed to be a happy occasion, I also held back my anger and kept quiet. But then Emma said, "I don't mind. I have no intention of getting along with you anyway." She spoke to us as if she was looking down on us. Ava and I, who had started to calm down at my husband's words, got angry again. Ava and I gave Emma stern looks, but she seemed to find it amusing. "You common folk are so quick to anger. Is someone from an upper-class family? I've never been angry before," she said cheerfully, boasting about being from an upper-class family. According to what William had told us, Emma's father is the director of a large company. I guess that's why she refers to us as common folk. The thought of such a woman becoming our daughter-in-law weighed heavily on us. Even my husband seemed to think that, under such circumstances, a marriage greeting would be impossible. So, he suggested to William and the others, how about we wrap this up for today? Seeing as this was just a meet and greet, the two of them hurriedly left. After they had left, Ava was still fuming. What was with that woman? She was boasting about being the daughter of an upper-class family just because your father is a company director. She can't get too ahead of herself. Even my husband, who had been trying to calm us down, seemed to be stunned and said, "William sure has a tough person to marry. I'm worried about what's to come." Sighing, he told us about how Emma had been a handful during the preparations for the wedding. The day before the wedding, Emma purposely came to our house and said, "Please make sure to wash yourself and your hair clean since you work at a mechanic shop, future father-in-law. And please make sure to wear a dress that won't embarrass you, future sister-in-law. You do realize you're an ugly sister-in-law, right? So at least make sure your appearance is decent." She said this in a snide tone. I was about to yell back at her in anger, but my husband responded politely, "Understood. We'll make sure not to cause any trouble." Emma seemed taken aback by this. She must have wanted to say more nasty things and watch us get angry, but she seemed unsure how to react to my husband's response and left with a dissatisfied look on her face. At the wedding the next day, Emma came in front of our family and said, "It's embarrassing for everyone to know your relatives, so please behave. Also, this area smells oily, and it's all because of you." She spouted her usual snide remarks. Mason, who had met Emma for the first time, said with a fascinated look, "I'd heard rumors, but she's worse than I expected." Normally, Mason has long unkempt hair and a beard, but that day he had cut his hair and came dressed in a suit, so Emma had no complaints. However, I wish he had come in his usual work clothes with his long hair and beard, just to see how Emma would react. After the wedding, we didn't hear from William at all. Worried, I said, "I wonder if William is doing okay," to which my husband responded, "No news probably means he's doing fine." I was worried too, but if we contact him, that wife of his might get angry. "Let's wait for them to contact us," he said, sounding resigned. 2 years passed without any contact from William, but Emma's behavior at the wedding still came up in our conversations. Whenever my husband and I, and Ava and Mason were all together for a meal, Mason said, "I don't think Emma knew who I was. No one introduced me to her. She probably saw me as some dirty relative," to which I replied, laughing, "It would have been funny if you had come in your usual work clothes, with your messy hair and beard. She might have kicked you out." Everyone laughed heartily at this. At the wedding, the atmosphere had been so tense that no one had introduced Mason to Emma, and Mason had missed his chance to introduce himself. By now, Mason had completely blended in with our family, and it felt like we had a wonderful son, even without William. Then, all of a sudden, one day, a heavy snowfall caused cars to get stuck everywhere. At my husband's shop, they received requests from customers to tow their cars, so they were very busy. The employees split up the work and attended to them. My husband and Mason had gone out on a request from a foreign car dealer my husband deals with. But when they came back from finishing the job, they both seemed downcast. Ava, who was worried, asked Mason what was wrong, but he just said, "No, it's nothing." He spoke as if nothing had happened, so I didn't think much of it. A few days later, William and Emma suddenly showed up at our house, and Emma was holding a baby in her arms. Seeing the baby sleeping in her arms, I couldn't help but break into a smile. Ava, who happened to be visiting, also smiled and said, "Emma, you had a baby." She reached out to touch him, but Ava recoiled from Emma's hand, yelling, "Don't touch her with your dirty hands. The smell from the oil will rub off." Seeing the baby made me forget, but indeed, even as a mother, Emma had not changed. I realized that as the atmosphere grew tense as usual, Emma said, "Now that our child is born, let's have a baby shower since it's your first grandchild. Please be generous with the gift money." As she spoke in her usual sarcastic tone, I put $300 in an envelope and handed it to Emma on the spur of the moment. If I had known beforehand, I would have prepared more adequately. But she came so suddenly that I didn't have time to prepare money or ask what she wanted so I could give it to her later. Snatching the envelope from me, Emma immediately checked the contents and shouted, "Are you kidding me? Only $300. That's not even enough for diapers." Really loud, my usually mild-mannered husband suddenly took the envelope back from Emma, saying, "Don't you disrespect us. The father of that child isn't William, is it?" He yelled back with the ferocity I had never seen in him before. Moreover, he started saying that the child's father wasn't William, which left me utterly confused. At the sound of my husband's yelling, Mason, who had been in the back room, came in looking puzzled. But upon seeing Emma, Mason looked shocked. When Emma saw Mason, she too looked startled and quickly tried to hide her face. Seeing Mason, my husband said, "Seeing Mason, does that jog your memory? You'll remember him from what we told your fancy minivan during the heavy snowfall, especially since you were complaining to Mason. I bet you haven't forgotten his face." He addressed Emma, but Ava William, and I still didn't understand, and we were all surprised. As my husband signaled, Mason brought out his phone and started operating it. In the meantime, my husband explained to us, on the day of the heavy snowfall, Emma and some president got stranded in a luxury minivan, and Mason and I went to rescue them. I didn't recognize Emma at first, but it struck me as odd that there was a baby in the car. I was wearing a mask, sunglasses, and I had a helmet on, so she probably didn't recognize me. Mason, on the other hand, had long hair and a beard, so even with a mask on, you must remember him. When my husband finished speaking, Mason said, "Everything is on our car's dash cam, so she can't deny it." He showed his phone to Emma. Emma, seeing the screen, gasped and immediately turned her face away from the phone. Ava, William, and I stared at the screen. Indeed, Emma and a man we didn't recognize were complaining to Mason. "We have a baby on board, moving already, you slacker." Emma was yelling on the screen while my husband and Mason were putting chains on the expensive minivan. Emma and the unknown man were whispering to each other. My husband, with a scary look on his face, said, "The dashcam doesn't record sound, but I heard everything. William is such a fool for believing that the child is his." He spoke with a ferocity I had never seen before. "You guys said, well, Emma, you're the fool for talking about your affair right in front of your father-in-law without even realizing it." As he was speaking, William, "What are you saying? Is this all true? Tell me," suddenly yelled out. Emma stammered, "Of course, it's a lie." She answered with a forced laugh, but the paleness of her face seemed to say otherwise. Responding to Emma's excuse, Mason chimed in, "Didn't you say that you divorced William at the right time? I clearly heard you. You also said you'd make sure to get child support, right? You sounded pretty pleased about that." Mason also started speaking the truth. Upon hearing this, Emma became agitated, her hands shaking as she held her baby, and the baby started crying. Seeing her crying baby as an opportunity, Emma exclaimed, "Look what you did. The baby's crying because you're all mean to me. Enough is enough. I'm going home today." Saying this, she left William behind and stormed out. William turned even redder in anger than the baby, but once Emma was gone, he seemed to calm down a little. "Dad, is what you said earlier true?" He asked his father for confirmation. Again, his father silently nodded, and Mason added, "Emma's lover is the president of a company that does business with our shop. I heard from some dealers that Emma accompanied him when he came to buy a car. Apparently, he bought a minivan because they were having a baby," he explained in detail. William buried his head in his hands and crouched down, but later, a DNA test proved that the child was indeed not William's. William immediately filed for divorce, but Emma, on the other hand, proclaimed, "Marrying a commoner like he was my mistake." She yelled defiantly. However, the DNA test results showed that the father of the child was not the president. another lover, causing more confusion. It seemed that Emma had cheated with another man, and the child was apparently his. But the man was married. William claimed compensation in the divorce proceedings against Emma, but also sought compensation from her two lovers. Emma's family, who had boasted of their high-class background, turned out not to be that wealthy and apparently had to borrow money to pay the compensation in the divorce proceedings. The reason she had an affair with the president was her aspiration for a high-class lifestyle. But unfortunately, Emma's remarriage with the president didn't happen. Far from remarrying, she was claimed for compensation for breach of engagement on his part. After parting ways with Emma, it seems that William had developed a distrust towards women. "I'll never get married again," he declared, starting to live alone. "For my husband and me, our first grandchild turned out to be an illusion. However, we soon found out that Ava was expecting a child, and we, as a couple, were overjoyed. Mason, in a light-hearted jerk towards my husband, said, 'Rest assured, the baby is definitely mine. When the baby comes, we're going to start living together with Ava and Mason. It seems like we're in for a lively life.'"